everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of Revving Up with Revenge. I'm super excited about today's episode because I'm joined here by my good friend, former colleague, and go-to-market expert, Tom Murtaugh. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tom, let's jump right into it. When you were a kid and you were thinking about your career and you said, hey, I really want to be in go-to-market. I really want to be in private equity. What went through your mind? How did you know this is what you wanted to do your entire life?
Yeah, I knew from when I was 6, RevOps, that's exactly, my mom had books. My parents had books for me on RevOps. It was great. Salesforce wasn't even invented yet, but they were still talking about CRM. So, I was born to do this. I think the funniest thing is there's people with professions, like my neighbor's a doctor. And I asked him the same question, and that's his response. That's his actual response is no, I knew I needed to be a spinal surgeon when I was 6 and my dad had a bad back and I wanted to fix it. I'm like, that's amazing. I'm like, I still don't know if I know what I want to do. But getting back to the real question, the earliest thing that I remember telling my parents that I wanted to be a builder, and I literally meant like a house builder, like somebody that built things. But I think it still rings true right now as I think about my career and what I've done. And I've always been both in something that has always had a bit of science to it, because I really like math and science growing up, but something that also had creativity to it. And because I was a musician growing up, and I actually spent 2 years after college playing music before I did anything else. So I really look at what I'm doing now and this whole journey from consulting to revenue operations, general operations, and now to working in operations for a private equity company as that mix of kind of like science and math, and then also this real big dose of creativity with it too.
From what you've shared, it looks very diverse, right? You've done everything from sales training, revenue operations, go-to-market operations, or general operations. How did you know when it was the right time to make a pivot? And how did you know what was the next thing to add, right? Because, one would look at your LinkedIn and it's like, man, these moves are brilliantly planned and got you to an amazing place. And the other question is, I imagine leaving some places when you're doing well, getting accolades is hard. And so how did you know to make those transitions?
Yeah, no, thanks. I look at my LinkedIn and I'm like, was this really the best thing to do? And honestly, I think the moves in hindsight were good, but sometimes I'm like, I wonder what people think. I don't think everybody would look at it and say brilliant, but I appreciate the compliment. This is going to sound maybe horrible, but I usually know it's time for me to do something different when I get bored. When I'm doing the same thing over and over, or I feel like I've built something to a point. This is maybe more true for my recent transitions where I felt like I've built something to a point where now I'm just pulling the levers and I have the people and the processes in place where they're able to kind of operate on their own. I don't want to just be the guy that's there doing performance reviews and then, having everybody else to do the work. I still like getting my hands dirty. And sometimes it's a double-edged sword because it's a good thing and it can also be a dangerous thing at the same time.
As you've worked through your career and have made decisions, what's something risky that you've done that has paid off and paid off maybe more so than other decisions, right? Like a bet you've made or something you've tried that might have been off the beaten path.
Most of the jobs that I've had came from people that I've worked with before. And that always felt like the safe bet, right? You're like, okay, I'm going somewhere friendly. I know these folks. I made a jump to my job at Calibra, actually. I really didn't want to leave the position I was at before. I was at this company called AppNexus. I was working with great people. I built this great team. But I met the CRO there named Philip Carty. And literally, I remember the moment when I was talking to him. I'm like, I have to take this job. And something in me said, this person is going to be a great connection for you. And not just now, but for the future. And Philip is one of my dearest friends at this point. He's led to almost every other place I've moved in my career since then. But it was a big risk for me because I had to go into a complete unknown without familiar faces. I knew I was going to be working with great people. And I think taking that risk on people and relationships and people that are going to really push you and make you better is one of the best risks I think you could take in your career.
I couldn't agree with that more. Yeah. From what I know, and feel free to elaborate on this, you're in a very different position now, right? You're director of portfolio operations. You are the go-to-market guy for Nordic Capital. You oversee and help influence a lot of companies, a lot of people. What does that look like? How has your leadership style changed, your collaboration style? Because you're now in a position that a lot of us hear about, but I don't think many people really understand. Yeah. And those that I do run into, they understand it, but they all have like a different flavors.
It's a really interesting job. And I took it because I've had some friends that have done this, a former boss that's done this at a VC company. But I think every place is different, and Nordic's very different, I think, anywhere else. I took it because I thought it would be a good mix between operating and consulting, where you're a sparring partner, you're providing ideas, you're helping drive things as a consultant, but you're also getting a little bit deeper into the weeds with everybody. And for the most part, I would say a high-level perspective, that is probably the right way to look at it. It's like long-term consulting engagements without having to try to sell extra work, with a lot of skin in the game on your behalf. with the people that you're working with. But I think when I first started, I really was starting to get more in the weeds with folks and try to actually do the work myself. I realized very quickly after getting into one really great comp project, but almost way too deep, that the best use of my time and me was not to get deep in the weeds, but to help people get to a certain point, find the right folks that could come in. So I look at myself now more as an assessor and a coordinator, figuring out what the problem is and then figuring out the best types of resources to either put in place or people to use to go make that happen, and trying to keep myself as free as possible to keep going on and helping in that assessment phase. I also think that this job is more of a product manager than anything. And I say this to my boss all the time, because the key to this, especially when you're buying similar businesses in similar sectors with similar investment thesis, finding what are those projects that you can package up that can have high impact across all of the portfolio companies. And then the goal is really to figure out how to create demand for those, or identify those, figure out what impact they're going to have, create demand for it, and then create the delivery mechanism and some of the delivery materials for it, and then go and launch this across a bunch of different portfolio companies. And I started doing that. First kind of product I created, it started really taking off, and it's almost 10% of the portfolio with a lot more to come. And I think that's really the way to do it, to have an impact in this type of role. So that similar mix between consulting and operating, but with that product mindset that you have to put on top of it.
This is the first I've heard of this, right? So I think this is a super interesting lens of thinking about it almost as like a portfolio product manager of sorts. And you're doing this assessing. What are you looking for? What are you looking for in terms of the talent and the people? Because it sounds like, from what I understand, you're also having to pick who's on the team, who's going to actually help drive change, who's going to be a blocker. What are the traits that you're looking for that either give you hope and confidence, or like, I got to talk to this guy?
You need to find this right balance of people that can help in this role, that could be on the team and do this role well. They have to be super sharp, really smart, but they need to lead with humility, because you can't be walking into a company and saying, oh, I'm so smart. And I've been on the other side of the table of VCs and PEs coming in and saying, oh, look how smart. And I'm like, leave me the heck alone. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. You've never been an operator. So that approach of humility, but then also being able to show that, hey, I do know what I'm speaking about. Having previous operating experience really gives you that gravitas to challenge them a bit. And then just being super aware of the relationship and making sure you're focusing on building a trust and a relationship with folks before you start just spouting off your opinions and ideas that probably aren't even appropriate for what they're doing. And then finding the right products for these companies too. It really comes back to what is the low-hanging fruit that is dead simple. Like, it almost needs to seem almost elementary for people. But the thing is, when you find those couple of things, a lot of companies have these things that they should be doing that they're not doing. And it sounds so stupidly simple that you almost disregard it, or you're almost like, oh, there's no way they're not doing this. But in reality, they all aren't. So it's like finding those and being stupid simple about it, not overcomplicating it. I think, one of the partners we used to work with always said to me, and I steal this to this day, he would always say, you got to ski over the moguls. You just got to ski over the moguls. And I say that so much today, because I think you do have to not get into the weeds. Don't get too complicated. Just got to ski over the moguls and get them a good answer that's going to help drive something and change something tomorrow. It doesn't need to be perfect.
Switching gears just a little bit here, Tom, as you have seen and have lived, the whole discipline of revenue operations has changed, and in many ways is being defined as we speak, right? So one, what's your sense on like how this function is changing, especially in the world of AI? And then secondarily, like, how does someone prepare for a career in revenue operations, whether they have a sales background or not?
Let me start first with the role. In my last role before moving to PE, I was overseeing overall operations for a technology company, and I wasn't reporting to any of the people that I actually supported. So I supported our chief product officer, our chief marketing officer, our chief revenue officer, but I was reporting to the CFO. And it was done on purpose because, number one, you want to have a little bit of that separation between church and state, but it also doesn't make sense for you to be reporting to any of those one people when you're supporting everybody. And I think revenue operations is falling into that, right? Because in revenue ops, you can be supporting the CRO, chief customer officer, chief marketing officer. So you need to really figure out, how do you build those relationships with folks as a peer, right? Instead of a reporting line. Back when it was sales ops and you're reporting to the CRO, it was super easy. Like, you're aligned 100%, no problem, who buttered your bread, whatever you want to say. With revenue ops, you have to be that intermediary and you have to be that third party. So the amount of EQ that's required for the job is absolutely huge. So I think that is one of the biggest things as a revenue ops person. Regarding AI, I think it's now, revenue ops went through a big shift shift where it was like, okay, we've got to figure out what this role is, what this job is. Then you started doing offshoring. You'd hire a certain amount that'd be local, and then you would start offshoring or nearshoring to lower cost. And that started working. And I think a lot of people got a lot of leverage out of that. We have a couple portfolio companies that are doing a really good job at this. And this is literally how they approach AI. What is the job I hate to do? What is that job? Whether it be cleaning up stock photos, writing blog posts. They even do, this is making us look bad here. There's AI out there that does podcasts for you. You just give it like prompts and it does podcasts, right? We aren't AI for our listening, just so you know. But, you know.
Or are we?
Or are we? Who knows?
What would AI Tom and Quang tell you?
Yeah, we should do that. We should create AI versions of ourselves and see what they say. It'd probably be better. But find that stuff that you hate to do, and I'm sure there's an AI solution. So if you start chopping off that dreaded stuff, it really gets you to the higher value things. And the reason I said that you need that EQ, because look, toll AI can completely replace human relationships. I feel like being able to have a human relationship and being able to persuade and influence people is going to be the last bastion of humanity before AI takes over. So those traits are incredibly important as you start chopping down all the stuff that you hate to do.
You heard it here first, folks. The last bastion of humanity.
I'm sorry if I speak in such hyperbolic language sometimes.
Oh, no, by the way, I agree wholeheartedly.
Maybe I went a little hard on that that proclamation.
Yeah. When we're fighting over clean water and the AI bots have ruined what's left of the earth.
Yeah, exactly.
You heard it first, folks. Tom Murtaugh.
That's right.
I think AI and the impact it's going to have on work and people and all of it, right? It's no longer, do I have an AI strategy? I just think more fundamentally, do I have a strategy for the future that is going to be largely driven by AI? That's my view. And I'm curious, you mentioned a really interesting topic earlier around like revenue operations, and something I've been hearing about a lot lately, parallel to what you shared, Tom, is where should this function sit?
Yeah.
Should it report to sales? Should it report to operations?
I don't think I have a good answer for that. First off, you need to understand why you think you need revenue operations. And I would think almost any company, especially technology companies, could benefit from it, because I look at revenue ops as being able to really bring together the entire customer lifecycle. But then you need to think about the specific situation that the company is going through and the rationale for bringing RevOps in. Let me use an analogy. Pricing, right? I think you could say the same question for pricing. And I think the answer for pricing is actually easier answer. And I always say, again, there's so much more nuance to it, but I say it's about the growth stage. Like in the beginning, when you're starting a company, maybe 0 to 50 million ARR, speaking about B2B enterprise SaaS, you want pricing in sales because you want to move fast. You need to figure out what's going on. And then that's going to become like the inmates running the prison at some point. So it needs to get over to finance to get it into shape for a little bit and maybe take the 50 to 100 million journey over in finance. And then after that 100 million journey, you probably want to put it in product because you want to make sure you're developing and building pricing around it. So I don't know if RevOps, maybe in a growing company and you're saying, I want to start with RevOps straight out of the gate, maybe it lives in sales to start because that's where you have the most focus. And then as you build up marketing, as you build up customer success, as you bring customers on, it makes more sense for RevOps to become an independent party. And a function shouldn't be built around people, obviously, right? Like that's like 101, but still you need to make sure that the people that you're supporting and your RevOps leader, whoever it is, they're capable of working together. Because if that is not happening, function can't live independently. So making sure those relationships are strong and respectful is really important.
It sounds like there's less of a one perfect or one generalized answer. It depends on what you're building, what phase of growth you're in,
where your current focus is, right? What the real need is for starting a RevOps function.
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. Well, I wish I had more time for this episode, but we don't. And I want to leave you, Tom, with one last question. If you go back to 6-year-old Tom, who's thinking about being a builder and looking at beautiful houses and thinking, wow, I want to create things that are lasting, what advice would you give to your younger self?
That is such an existential question. That is really, really hard. What I would probably tell myself is, this is going to sound maybe like horrible advice, but don't try to make what you love be your job. Try to integrate the things about what you love into something that actually supports you, and make sure whatever you love, you're doing on the side without monetary restraints to it. Because I tried to do what I love, playing music, for years, and it almost destroyed it for me. But the pieces of playing music and the creativity that came to it are so integral into any success that I've had in my career. And I think understanding that and thinking about that, because people often say to people, follow your passion, and I think think that can sometimes be like the absolute worst advice in the world. So I think it's about figuring out how you could find things that are adjacencies to your passion that you could use.
I 100% agree. I'm passionate about mixed martial arts and combat sports, but I can't take a punch for anything. So,
I'm glad you're not trying to do that professionally. You picked a much better, and it's very applicable for your role. You do have to defensive, offensive.
I got to take the punches. And, awesome.
The metaphorical punches.
Tom, metaphorical punches and sometimes literal punches. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. For everyone listening, please tune in next week. We'll be back with Tom, and we're going to go deep into a particular situation and get some additional insights. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me.